I'm really excited about this conversation today, and if you're tuning in again, appreciation for spending some time with us on this topic. We promise to keep it lively. We'll throw a few practical examples at you and give you maybe some ways to think about this topic going forward. Thanks again for tuning in. If this is the third time that you're joining us in this series. Maybe I'll just do a little recap for you on the next slide. So, if you remember, some of the way that we started this conversation was really around what it takes to kind of unlock new opportunities out of the insights that we see in some of the data that helps us understand customer experience. And so, Megan and Ben were some of the first voices in that conversation, and they brought a lot of great insights to the table from different ways that each of our organizations, Qualtrics and Bond, have been keeping tabs on how customers are feeling about the experiences that they're having with brands. And then if you were here to join us to celebrate CX Day, we had Carrie and Ryan talk about, how to go about it, get a little bit more practical and underneath what the techniques are that are at play and some of the ways that companies and brands are helping to really kind of amplify some of what Forrester puts out around the three E's. And so if you haven't seen that conversation, you can always go back and see the recording. But today we're going to be a little bit more future focused. So if you want to think of like everything we learned was that first session, the present day, how do we go about doing it? Keenan and James are going to bring a bit more future facing orientation to it. Don't worry, not sort of flying car future facing, practical, what do you do tomorrow kind of stuff. But I'm excited to have both of their voices, very different lenses on this topic. And so Keenan, James, thanks for taking time to have this chat.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
One of the things that maybe I'll call attention to is just the way that each of our organizations has been helping customers span the entirety of this spectrum. So first, obviously, the deep expertise in capturing and visualizing some of the data and building patterns and trends out of that and turning that stuff into recommendations. That's kind of the bread and butter that Qualtrics is known for. And oftentimes, when we're getting involved to collaborate, it is about taking that then into broader strategies and the nitty-gritty of the design around a customer experience, and then figuring out, colloquially, we call this the other side of the counter. On the other side of the counter, what's the experience that employees are having? What is the strategy that we need to take with them? Today, these guys are going to help talk about some of the new tools, new tech, and new ways of going at this topic on both sides of this counter. A little bit more on sort of the other side of the counter with employees and the way that human beings are greeting some of this topic. So from an agenda perspective, I'll try and keep us on time and on topic, but mostly you're going to be hearing Keenan and James' voices and the perspectives that they've got around, how AI is being perceived in the marketplace, what's practical about it and useful, maybe distinguishing some hype from what's helpful today. And then really a lot of focus, I think you'll hear, so listen for this, on just the way human beings are relating to this topic. There's things that are sort of underpinning people's reactions, maybe early reactions to it, adoptions of the topic going forward. And we'll, in particular, unpack some of the techniques and the tools that Qualtrics and Bond bring to the table and some case studies that are maybe helpful for you to think about for your own business. And so one of the things I'm most excited about in this interaction is just the way that these two topics live together. From a emotional sort of aspect to something that feels very rational and very technical and very mechanical in AI, that there's actually a lot more common ground between these two topics. And I think you're going to hear largely a glass half full with a recognition, that there is some things that people need to adopt in order to make full use of some of the data that's in front of us that customers are exhausting. You could kind of think of it that way, in less structured ways that help bring more emotion to what otherwise is big scaled machines that we're all sort of building and operating in order to treat customers with, ironically, maybe more humanity in those customer experiences. And so listen for that tension all the way through today's discussion. And first, maybe Keenan, I'll throw to you. Set things up and sort of frame the way that you've been looking at this topic as we dealt with it ourselves, as we deal with it with clients and their brands.
Thanks, Sean. And I know we're here to talk about emotions in AI here today, specifically when it pertains to CX. But as Sean mentioned, as you think about AI within the customer space, it's really hard to ignore how this also impacts employees. Because if I'm a customer as part of one organization, I'm also likely an employee as part of another. And so as we think about things like AI receptivity or people's aversion to using AI, this really goes across both sides of the counter. If I'm less likely to be comfortable using AI at my workplace, I'm less likely to be comfortable as a customer as well. But really, a lot of these insights that we have today are also very time bound. Thinking about how fast this space is moving, some of the things that we talk about today in terms of risks or aversions might not be the same 1 or 2 years from now. So that's also important to take into account. But really starting with some foundational truths. I think when it comes to emotions, traditionally these have been really hard to measure. You look at things like NPS, really simplified scoring. Maybe it's been expensive to be able to collect the sorts of data that you use for emotions. But really, there's been a lot of difficulty at unraveling this thing that is so crucial in terms of understanding customers' motivations. Yet we also recognize that the customer should really be at the core of this experience, even with AI coming into the picture. And then on the other side, looking at AI, we hear from most organizations, if not all, that it's expected to make large impacts as part of their industry. Yet when you dive deeper as part of some of these people's opinions, they don't necessarily know how it's going to impact their business. So they recognize there's large potential and the magnitude's really large, but the path towards getting there is a bit fuzzy today. And so looking at some of the areas in which we've found success, we'll talk about that a bit later. But really, as it comes to AI, it's very rare that it operates on its own. It's not like Skynet in the future where it's going to operate the end-to-end experience. Really, you're looking at specialized AI at certain points in the process where it makes sense, and then humans at different points in the process where you still need that sort of human-centric interaction as well.
You can have this conversation without a good Skynet reference. Thanks for kicking that off, Keenan.
Thanks, Sean. And so, diving a bit more into the trends, I think we have something from the consumer report this year from Qualtrics as well.
No, absolutely. It's a great segue, Keenan. And when we think about like the main concern around AI from both an employee perspective, but also as you mentioned, as like a consumer, is that lack of a human connection, right? And we would be remiss if we weren't talking about EQ and AI. And I love how that was set up with this particular session. And so, as part of our recent trends, a couple of things that really stood out to us was around how AI is evolving. And one of the things that people are seeing is like the augmented element of AI and how it's not providing like the best experience. It is not providing an experience where people want to engage with it more. And so there's a huge concern around consumers around that lack of a human connection. But on one side of the equation is that connection, but on the other is the threat. Like, is AI going to replace me in my job? When really many should be thinking about it from the perspective of how is AI going to transform my job and allow me to do more, and maybe even to do more with less. And so when we think about how consumers engage with AI and how employees engage with AI, it'll be super important to make sure that we're creating experiences for them that are going to be instrumental, if you will, into how they're engaging with particular brands or with particular employers.
And I think that's a really great point around some of that human connection. I think you're seeing around half of the people see that as a growing concern. And I think if you look at the trends, this is growing from even last year's trends. But you're seeing really the impact of the AI is getting better on the left side. You're seeing people less concerned about the quality of the interactions, the extra effort that it takes. And so it's deciding, well, where do I actually put AI as part of this process? And so within this matrix here, this kind of illustrates where consumers' comfort is today. So at the bottom left, you'll see superficial pain points with very simple and easy to measure tasks. So looking at things like account changes. And I think we see consumers are very comfortable with this being a virtual experience, almost something that is between AI and self-serve. Whereas if you get towards more complex experiences that are still superficial, things like concierge services, valet, you still want that sort of in-person connection. And then as you go upwards on the graph as well, more immersive experience, think about product demos, viewing a space in person. Like these are still things that customers aren't ready to move virtual and still want that in-person connection. And then again, this is something that we might see adapt in 1 or 2 years, but this is kind of where we see the comfort level today. And then finally, as we talk about comfort, people's sort of aversion to AI, we did a study that tried to see, okay, well, why are people really not willing to use AI? Where do they feel uncomfortable? Do they see it solving some of their problems? And we did see a big generational gap as part of that. So you see people from Gen Z to older millennials really starting to grasp the idea that AI is something that can help solve their problems, especially as part of the workplace. Whereas you start to move towards Gen X as well as baby boomers, this is something where they still feel like a human is better able to answer their problems. And so as you start thinking about a strategy of, well, where do I implement AI as part of this customer experience? Just recognizing that it's segmented and not a one size fits all is really important as part of this conversation as well.
Yeah, and it's actually, sorry, Keenan, it's great
Yeah.
to see on this one because this actually mirrors what we saw as part of the Qualtrics trends reports as well. And it's about building that habit, right? We're seeing, regardless of the generation, right, employees who use AI like on a daily or even a weekly basis are much more comfortable and more optimistic about its use cases than not, versus those that might be using it on a monthly basis are more worried than they are optimistic. So great that our research is actually aligning and we're moving forward.
Definitely. And I think this is really about introducing people to the technology and getting them comfortable with it. I think there's people who just, without any push in towards testing out some of the things coming out in AI, they'll just never have the foundation to trust in it, versus a lot of employees or organizations that are trying to push towards this message. You're seeing people become more comfortable in terms of using it for their day-to-day tasks. And so one of the things that we've done as an organization since around 2022, we've started looking at a lot of areas in which AI might be applicable to our business. So looking at proof of concepts, we even went as far into commercial generation based on AI. And so throughout this sort of endeavor, we tried to find, well, where are the places where we can actually practically implement this within our clients? Where are clients asking for AI to be a part of the solution? And really, we found 3 key areas. The first is integrating this as part of understanding unstructured data. The second is looking at using specialized AI in orchestrated processes. So this means that while it's not AI from end to end, it's not a singular AI, you're really mixing and matching different capabilities throughout. And then finally, changing the way we learn and operate. So really enabling the people within your organization or enabling your customers to use AI tool sets as they're released.
And folks who specialize, like we do, Keenan, in first-party data, like known customers, et cetera, I think that unstructured data has often been something on the periphery, less explicit signals, mainly because I think, the promise of big data didn't come yet, at the time it was made with all the tools that we have now to be able to make sense of that data, put patterns to that data, put context to that data against all the known party data, all the first party data that, a typical customer engagement, known customer experience has to it. So I like the orientation of practicality, James. When we've had this conversation, as a principal at Qualtrics, there is this constant tension of like, what could it do in the future, but also what can it do today, and getting like very sleeves rolled up practical about it.
No, absolutely. And in fact, as we think about building habits, we can actually get people to consider like what that transformative future looks like with AI. But one of the things that you touched on, Keenan and Sean, is around like this idea of unstructured data. And as part of the trend report that we recently published, right, we can understand and respect the fact that many would respect it, but understand that feedback is diminishing, and it's finding those signals wherever they are and bringing it in to help you paint a complete picture. And specifically, unstructured data is going to be the key to do that. And when I think about part of the equation, a lot of customers are saying, like, I cannot pick up one more piece of data. I just have to process it. And it's like, well, wait a second. If you can move to that transformative element of AI, you really can understand what AI can do to help you make better sense of that data and to be able to stitch it together to make a complete picture, or as complete of a picture as you possibly can around your prospects and customers.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to unstructured data, I think a lot of people underestimate really the breadth of what's available and how much unstructured data they already have. So what we've seen in many different industries is around 80% of data in organizations is unstructured versus 20% structured data. So you're seeing a lot of emphasis around some of the more tabular data, easy to analyze data today, but really you're missing a lot of the picture when it comes to leaving that unstructured data out of the focus. And so a lot of the time, companies aren't collecting this data because they're like, well, we don't have the capabilities to actually unearth some of the insights within this. But what we found is with AI, whether it's natural language processing or using computer vision, is actually able to help you through that process. And so really what we've started saying is that AI has really changed the cost equation to be able to collect this. And we start back with our idea of, well, where do emotions fit this? We understand that emotions lead towards stated attitudes, and then that drives outcomes as part of your business, whether engagement or transactional outcomes. And a lot of businesses have been focusing on the right side, which is very structured engagement focused metrics, whether these are digital metrics or transactions. But this is really only focusing on what's happening because the customer feels this way, not actually understanding what's driving the customer's motivations. And so really what we think as an organization is you should really have this measurement across that entire cycle, not just focused on the customer's outcomes. And as you start looking at AI technology and how it's developing, because you can get a better understanding of the unstructured data that exists within your organization, that actually gives you more reason to continue to build up the collection of the data that could help inform, well, what are customers feeling about my brand, or what are their attitudes towards my brand?
It's an interesting point of view on that, Keenan, because I think you're absolutely right. Many brands are actually focusing on the transactional element of things, and those signals are obviously there. But one of the things that I found interesting, there was a HBR research study, and I think a lot of brands actually are downplaying emotion and emotional connections with their consumers or their customers and prospects. HBR had a study that said emotionally connected customers spend on average twice as much as your highly satisfied customers. And if you think about that, right, a lot of people are their gold star is to have a highly satisfied customer, when really a gold mine actually could be those that have a greater connection with your brand. And again, it's that emotional connection that kind of comes in to supplement your transactional data. And AI is at the forefront of actually helping us tap into tying those directly together.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it leads towards, well, how do we actually evaluate this from a customer perspective? I think as you talked about, really trying to understand that brand connection, that tie between a customer and the brand. Obviously, you have behaviors which are relatively easy to measure. You look at email engagement, web engagement, looking at the internal transactional profile as well as what they're spending with other brands. You can start building up an idea of how tied with your brand they are But until you also get the other side, which is looking at voice of customers, social listening, even looking at actions that you know are tied to emotions to that brand, you really can't get that holistic picture of not only, well, this is what the customer is doing today, but also where they might head towards in the future. And so our customer experience index really attempts to measure both the existing outcome-based metrics and what they're doing with your brand today, as well as how much more can you grow that connection with them in the future.
Yeah, Keenan, I know you've had places where you've applied this with a handful of our clients to be able to like start to tap into that emotional quotient in respect with all of the more stable, more regular transactional data signals, et cetera. I think in the conversations that we've had with Forrester and others around this, there have been, I think, a lot of attempts at being, trying to sort of make that connection and draw that connection. And James, one of the things you said was just like, the act of collecting used to be a sort of question mark because the cost to get at it was maybe too high or the effort was too long a time frame, et cetera. Those things are evaporating. Those barriers are sort of coming down with this tool set. And so it makes models like this something that, as sophisticated as it is actually still fairly practical in tomorrow's terms.
That's right. And if we think about the evolution of feedback, I mean, before we would always consider like, feedback is a gift, and when we get it, we got it. But it's diminishing. And we thought, okay, we can actually tune into more social channels or we can tune into more review sites. Well, what we're discovering is that, yes, that's actually a gold mine of information. But for many customers, they're not even willing to leave a negative review. They're just moving on to your competitor. And so it's like, how do you get those early signals where satisfaction turns into a mild dissatisfaction, where you're able to then take elements and effort to be able to maintain that relationship? And so, unstructured data and listening everywhere is more important today than ever, especially as we think about that complete picture of connecting behaviors and attitudes together with transactions and other signals that are literally just like flying around us.
Yeah, Keenan, I know you've tried this in categories that have less engagement and categories that have more engagement. You want to talk about some of the learnings in the higher engagement categories? Because I think there's interesting components there.
Yeah, I think as it comes to the higher engagement categories, like as you start to think about, well, how do I actually collect data across like these customers? You're seeing really this over-reliance over time on some of these engagement signals on like that are more structured, because they haven't had to operate similar to their counterparts on the lower transactional frequency. And so you started to see companies, well, like let's say auto companies, where they can only really sell, let's say, a car every 5 years. I think you've seen them understand, yes, there's a lot of detail in all of the engagement signals outside of transactional, voice of customer, trying to understand exactly how they're engaging with your brand outside of a transaction. And you're seeing a bit of a lag, I think, coming from some of the higher transactional frequency brands. And I think that's going to likely chip away at them over time unless they actually adapt towards understanding some of the signals on the right side. And I think what we've seen in terms of applications of, well, these signals across the board is not only looking at customers specifically or customer segments, we can also take these same principles and apply them at a brand level. So I think partnerships is a great example of this. I think over time, you've seen it evolve from, well, traditionally you'd say, well, I want to partner with this brand just because it feels right. It feels like that brand fits with my brand. And so it's traditionally been kind of a gut check. You have some operational considerations there as well, but really there wasn't this sort of quantitative, qualitative mix that allowed you to understand, well, is this actually the best fit? And so what we've done for a beauty client as part of our partnerships area is really looked at this entire spectrum of signals. So not only looking at the share of wallet that my brand has with the other brand, and so our shared customers equal 20% of my population, but also looking at, well, does this brand actually invoke the same emotions that I'm looking to add to my program? Maybe these are things that I don't see within my program, so I want to be complementary to anything that I have. Or even if I'm looking at engagement-based signals or attitudinal signals. So we've started to look across the entire spectrum and scoring across that to try and understand the strength of a potential partnership. And ultimately, we are still looking at operational considerations and validating through actual gut checks at the end of the day. But still, we have a foundational reason for it based on the data across these different signals that we've collected.
Yeah, the root partnerships are intended to bring sort of relevance, right? I lean on an adjacent brand to bring some more relevance to the relationship that I have with a customer. And I think something, James, you said earlier, the diminishing and I move on, I'm not even sure I'm going to take the effort to leave like a negative comment. I think that has been true. I think we shared last time on the following slide a little bit of data around kind of, what we would characterize as like silent attrition. When people leave your brand, when people leave your loyalty program, they don't sound a horn to say I'm leaving. They just kind of dwindle. They just sort of disappear and fade. And I think like being able to pick up that signal out of the less structured data that isn't as apparent, given your transaction frequency or some other signal that we've used to be the bellwether before. I think this kind of tool set gives you very real, very practical ways to inform like, churn models and next best action models and all of these with less structured signals coming from customers.
If only they would sound that horn, it would be great, wouldn't it?
It would make life a lot easier if people announced that they were, not feeling
Departing.
relevance and the party is over.
And I
Okay.
think it's a really good point about trying to understand some of those signals. And I think, as you mentioned, some of those brands which have relied on these transactional signals, they're very focused on churn modeling and advanced churn modeling, understanding why customers leave their brand. And so I think without that emotional picture, the attitudinal picture that you can get in somewhat real time or at least quickly after that interaction, you're going to see customers leave their brand. I know we've seen this stat here that 43% will churn after just a signal negative interaction. And so if you can get to that customer quicker, if you can understand the customer at that point in time and be able to provide something that might even help with 10% of those customers, you can really have this measurable impact as part of your business. And I know we touched on the second point, which is looking at AI as something that fits within certain parts of your business, not looking at as the all-encompassing thing that's going to replace your business. So often we get questions from some of our clients, like, when do I use AI? Where does it fit within my business? And what technology should I really use? And I think a lot of organizations are also looking at their use of ChatGPT or other chatbots within their business and saying, well, how can I build upon the concept beyond just generic chatbots within our organization? How do I take that next step? And I think what we've seen is that orchestrating small individual specialized AIs as part of an overall process is one way to be able to take that next step on the journey. And I'll give an example of where we've done it within our organization. So we have an agency arm of our organization which does a lot of creative for the different clients that we have. And so as you think about the creative process, and as we entered this, we didn't want to say, well, here's the AI technology, now let's find where it fits as part of this process. We really wanted to take this broad problem statement that really this process isn't necessarily quick. You have client requirements, the different images that you need to create as part of this before they go out to market. And so we wanted to understand the task breakdown of that, really what goes into making this process so long today. And so we took a look at the process from end to end and we found, okay, QA actually takes up a large portion of this. So making sure that something goes to market and it's localized to that specific market, that there's no grammatical mistakes, that it includes all of the brand requirements that have encompassed across all of these campaigns, or even things like accessibility requirements. And so this would usually be the longest part of this process. And we took a look at it and we're like, okay, how can we replace this one rule as part of this process? Or how can I replace the accessibility check here? And so we chipped away at it through various specialized AI capabilities. And at the end of the day, we had a mix of traditional technology, AI, as well as an end human check to be able to bring this to life. And so really we were able to shorten the amount of time to QA anything that we were creating from the span of weeks to a span of an hour or two across hundreds or thousands of assets. And so this is an example of where this orchestrated process intertwined with AI can come to play. And then finally, just changing the way we operate. And I'm going to talk about this in terms of EX, but I think this also really applies to CX as well. It's all about democratization of AI so that we don't just have it contained to specialist groups within an organization, but really understanding how do we get people comfortable with the concept of leading their own path with AI. And so the way we've done this within our organization, we have something called the Bond Behavioral Institute. It really has a lot of our core insights that we've developed over the years as an organization. So these are specialized insights that really apply to multiple arms of the business, but has been contained really within one area of the business so far. We've applied AI to that, have a chatbot that sits on top of that, and made it accessible to the people within our business. And I think one of the interesting things that we found throughout this process was when we first launched, there was people kind of knocking at our door saying, well, we want to be able to use the same capabilities as ChatGPT. And so ultimately, there's this part of the adoption, which is just early adopters who are waiting to take on this technology. But without any sort of push towards the technology, the usage kind of remains static to that core group. And what we found over time is that by doing grassroots sessions, by educating people on really what are the use cases I could actually use this in within my job, we found that within the 6 months since we've actually launched, the actual usage per day has increased almost 5 times. So that's, I think, goes back to the earlier point where people are kind of scared to use it at this point in time, but there are actual steps you can take towards pushing people towards using this as part of their day-to-day jobs.
Keenan, that is so important that it's almost when you think about like this idea of purpose-built AI, yes, there's going to be some that are like uber specific. And what I really appreciate about what Bond has done with your employees is you're actually listening. You're educating them on how to use it, right? Anyone has access to a large language model today, but it's how it's utilized that's probably the most important. And there's this expression, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Where is your solution or where is your AI going to like really hit home? And I'd like to kind of showcase that with this idea of a symphony or an orchestra here, right? Think about the operational systems that actually go into putting on the show, right? You might have a productivity system. You might be using Salesforce for CRM. You have ERP systems that are helping manage inventory and financial apps helping you with your ticket sales. Now, each one of those might have a different iteration of AI, right? But do you want that same level of AI to be the one to actually tell you what your audience is thinking? And that's where we think about experience management, right? Where Qualtrics is really like honed in to sharpen our pencil on our AI capabilities, right? We want you to understand your respective audience and take decisions to help better serve them. Like Microsoft's Copilot, great at analyzing your spreadsheets, helping create graphs. It'll even create a PowerPoint. I promise you, Qualtrics and our Qualtrics AI won't create PowerPoints for you because that's not what we're setting out to do. We're setting out to tell you what's actually happening with your customers. And when we think about the evolution of experience management, we think about specifically how it started out as a differentiator, like I'm not going to reinvent time, but going back to like financial systems, right? Ledgers were where everything happened. And then the introduction of a general ledger and a financial system. And then there was ERP systems were a differentiator. And now XM was a differentiator and everyone has experience management. And from that perspective, right, if we think about the evolution, AI is only making it better. But we have to be very cautious that we're not slapping AI onto everything or anything. I always joke that putting AI onto NPS, what's it going to tell you? It's going to show you your number. Is it going to tell you why it happened? Or is it going to give you the insights as to how to prevent the number from decreasing over time? And so looking at the evolution here, right, we started off in this notion of direct feedback, like surveys, right? We all love to survey people, and there was a point in time where people loved to take a survey because they felt that their voice was being heard. Then what happened? They'd fill out a survey. No action was being taken. What a waste of my time. You're not listening to me. Why should I give you my business? And we expanded on that with omni-channel listening, listening to where your customers are at across, multiple levels of social, different websites, different medias, right? Connecting with your consumers through like iMessaging or through Messenger, different signals that you could actually pull in. And then it evolved slightly to where how can you take action in the moment, right? I think some of our largest customers, and you mentioned Keenan, automotive, right? They sell a car every 5 years, but they have 5 years of maintaining loyalty with those consumers. And even if it's a matter of like we have a very large, reputable car brand that actually, when you take your car in first service, right, you might get in a survey or a prompt that's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Thumbs up allows them to understand that everything is going well. But the moment you hit that thumbs down, they act in the moment, right? They're pinging the car dealer or the local dealership that has your car in for service, and they're telling them to take action. Or let's say that someone provided feedback through a chat agent and they had a great experience. You might offer them like free shipping for their next purchase. But if somebody had a negative experience, you might offer them a discount code off of, a larger percentage for their next transaction. And it's at that point where we need to think about where the signals were, where they are, and where they're going, right? Unstructured data and the utilization of AI is going to help us get there. Because what we're hearing from customers is that they're drowning in data and thirsting for insight. Now, I realize that's kind of like a kitschy little tagline, and I admit it was fun creating it. But on the flip side, there's so much truth to this. We have customers that I'm sure everyone can relate to the fact that there's so many signals going from everywhere. Like I've had customers say, James, I cannot collect one more signal because I have to feel like I take action on it. And this visual here is meant to represent everything that's flying around you. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the idea is can you utilize AI and advanced listening systems to tune in to find the signal through the noise to understand where your customers and your employees are. And it's super important to lean into that because feedback is not only diminishing, but is changing. And so we think about to our customers, it's like, what are your biggest challenges with data silos, right? Most of us are likely a program owner, like a voice of customer or a voice of employee. We have our data contained within one part of our organization. There's someone on a different part of your organization that probably is doing something very similar with a very similar data set, but with a different outcome. How do you connect those signals and those silos together? And that is where AI is helping us with real-time data integration. And not only that, but helping you gain the insights and the signals as to like what's happening and why and how you can take action to move forward.
James, that last point you made about the overwhelmedness of a lot of organizations with like the data they've already got, the guilt maybe that they have that they're not using all the data that they've got the way that they feel they could be or should be. I think this is a continuous sort of obstacle, like a cognitive dissonance around. But if I collect one more thing and I don't know exactly how I'm going to use it, it just feels like too much. And the metaphor that Keenan and I are often using, in the practical work that we do is almost like a dish, like a dish with a set number of ingredients. Let's call it 10 ingredients. You might have 9 of those ingredients, but it's that one that sets off everything else. A lot of loyalty programs are guilty of like, I see how many times James flies with us or stays with us or shops with us. I'm going to pretend like I have no idea that James ever flies anywhere else or stays anywhere else or shops anywhere else. And so that one piece of data that says, I have all of James flying, or I only have half of James's flying, you would make wildly different decisions. And I think that that's kind of the thing now maybe that we've got to get over in the long promise that has been big data and this new tool set that can actually let us put some of it into action. We got to get back over that original objection that said, I'm not even using all the data that I have. I couldn't possibly eat another morsel of data.
That's absolutely right, Sean. And what's interesting is to think about the different flavors of AI and what they mean. Now, I kind of inferred earlier that we're seeing customers and brands of all sizes understanding what AI can possibly do for them today. Like, talk about Skynet. Like, in their mind, they think Skynet is the future when really we're like, no, that's really not the case. But for many of them, they don't know how it's going to change tomorrow because they can't even change or think about today. And in the case of experience management, right, there's this passionate future of like, real-time agent assistance, enabling your frontline to say the right words to your customers. When really we're saying, wait a second, let's take a step back, right? How can AI help us shape today and tomorrow? And when Keenan mentioned the QA assistant for your creative, right? That is a purpose-built tool or a service to help you with one part of your business. And the more we can get brands to actually lean in to figure out, okay, what is one small step I want to take today or this week in order to bring AI to help me with my insights or help me with my customers. And so I challenge folks, like, let's go back to basics, right? Experience management's about listening, understanding, and acting. Like, no matter what happens, like that's the core bread and butter. But like listening, right? Like data from anywhere. HBR was onto something with those emotionally connected customers because if you were to falter with them once, they're going to fall from emotionally connected and probably still stay highly satisfied, right? Versus satisfied to dissatisfied, right? And so, again, how do you collect those signals from anywhere? And I think, today with Qualtrics, right, we have conversational feedback that actually might compare a response to a question and be like, hey, can you provide a little bit more data? Or can you help us understand that picture? Because we want to make sure we understand what's happening to be able to take action. And then also understanding, right? Uh, Large language models are amazing at what they do, but how do they remember? Right? They might be able to process your data, tell you a sentiment or what's happened today, but are they going to remember, Sean, that I flew on one airline today and a different airline yesterday or tomorrow? No, you need a central hub or a memory bank, if you will, to keep all of those memories together. Because everyone today is talking about AI for hyper personalization. And from my perspective, I say it's bringing the context. It's telling you what's happened with me. It's giving you all the pieces of the puzzle that's led up to the experience that I'm in today to give you the greatest insight into what I'm likely to do. Am I going to attrit? Am I going to churn or am I going to spend more? Right? It's like leaning into giving you the threshold or tolerance of what I'm willing to do. And again, I think AI today is better suited to provide context than ever before. But
I
we
think
have
that's
to be very... Oh, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
no, I think that's true. And I think, this spectrum, which, our two organizations have aligned around, everybody's on a different part of this spectrum. Maybe this is a good time to you know, give people a sense of like how you've absorbed in the work that we do together, why people feel like they're in, one, two, three, or four of these spots, how that's maybe changed over time. And then I'd love to maybe turn it over to the audience to sort of see what this group now at this point in time is sort of feeling around this. But do you want to give this a little bit of texture for folks?
Absolutely, love to. Again, thinking about Skynet or this vision of this future of AI, we need to be careful because everyone's got a different, what I call spectrum of need, right? One right here is full control, like no AI, not a lick. Full autonomy might be the version of Skynet, right? And there's somewhere in between. And so looking at what we see here as like full control advisory, autopilot, or full autonomy, would love to pull this group to figure out where you are because everyone is different. And every time we poll an audience, we're actually seeing different numbers. But before I kind of allude to something else, I'd love to do a poll with this group to understand where you are in your organization rank on that spectrum of need.
Yeah, give us a sense of of sort of where there's no wrong answer here, by the way, and nobody's indicting themselves. Just give us a sense of sort of where you are on this journey, and probably the next handful of case studies and whatnot. We can fine tune a little bit towards wherever meet you where you are. I think once you've had a chance to do that vote, we'll bring up some of the results. And James and Keenan, I know you're gonna have a particular POV depending on where the bulk of that
Absolutely.
audience is. Okay, probably gave people enough time to pick one of those four on the spectrum.
Interesting. So we have a large majority, it looks like they're at a 2 in the advisory space. This is a great place to be. Look, we even have like a 3 and we have a 4, and we have one person and one. When I first brought this up, I created this slide about a year ago. People weren't even a 1, they were a 0, or they were a 0.5, right? For them, it was like, nope, not today. And where we're seeing the majority of people today is between 2 and 3. There's a couple of 3.5s, just like we see here. There's probably 4 people or 5 people that would actually say that they're largely driven to full autonomy. For us, it's important that we are creating solutions that meet you where you are. And if we're not doing that, then you're going to take your business elsewhere. We want this to be a level of comfort and familiarity to you where you feel like you're in the driver's seat. But for many people, they don't know what they want, right? And what they're doing is they're looking for a partner or a trusted partner that they understand has a vision and they want to hitch their wagon to. And so as we think about Qualtrics and Bond collaborating in this space, right? For us, we've intentionally built Qualtrics AI to be purpose-built specifically in this experience management space, right? First off, it's XM optimized, right? We have like the world's largest database of experience data, actions, and benchmarks. We can tell you people's tolerance, right? Whether it's a budget airline or a very high-end airline that'll go out of their way to make sure that their customers are treated well. It comprehends and contextualizes. This is the memory bank, if you will, not just of your organization, but of your customers. Imagine bringing that context to every insight or decision that's being made to be able to take action. Integrates into tech stacks, right? For those of you that are aware of Qualtrics, we have over 300 out-of-the-box integrations, including being able to tap into your own instances of AI to query data and bring things over. And most importantly, we're private and secure. We've been very transparent about this from the word go, probably more transparent than anyone else in this space. But more importantly, we're fit for purpose. We want to make sure that there's not one AI to rule them all, but we want to make sure that the AI we're delivering to you fits the purpose for which you're seeking. And not only do we say it's fit for purpose, right, but we provide solutions for almost everybody in your organization. And as we think about what we're hearing signals from our consumers, right? Keenan, you mentioned like the trends. We've recently published trends across customer experience, employee experience, and strategy and research. And you can find them over at qualtrics.com/trends. But I really encourage folks to take a look here because you're likely going to see something that aligns with your point of view, right? And largely what we're hearing is that I don't know what I need tomorrow, but I need to do something today. And that's where, again, we want to take it from being augmentative to transformative, but we want to do it in baby steps. And so for that, think about this idea of, in the past, we've talked about like, well, what if we could do this? And what if we could do that? Well, guess what? We're here. And I talk about transforming what if into what's next. And it's not because of AI, it's with AI. So imagine if your organization could help uncover blind spots, identify the next trend, or even help to foster loyal connections. Think about this as your North Star in a way that you can actually be able to use the transformative power of AI to bring your business into that proactive stage. And so don't just take my word for it. I mean, we think about people have come before you and people will come after you. And maybe one day you might be featured on a slide just like this. For those of us in the States, we call it Adidas, and for the rest of the world is Adidas, right? Adidas has been a huge partner with Qualtrics, helping us from a thought leadership perspective, leaning in. This specifically here, they've helped us validate and even further develop employee experience technology within AI to help them be able to understand what their employees are saying from their engagement or pulse surveys. And for them, they love the fact that, they can analyze 20,000 comments in a matter of minutes instead of weeks. Just like Dish Network, right? They love to hear feedback directly from their consumers. And Dish is amazing. They love to utilize video feedback. And Qualtrics offers video feedback as one of the mechanisms. And so instead of just typing your response, turn on your webcam and your microphone and share your testimony or your complaint or your frustration. Dish loves to see and hear directly from their folks. And so they would take weeks and months to actually analyze that. But with video feedback summarization from Qualtrics, they can do that in a matter of minutes, or even what was a week is now a matter of minutes. And so Dish has been hugely popular with that. And the consumers love the fact that they can just talk and they feel heard, literally and figuratively, because Dish is able to use those insights. And then last but not least, speaking of insights, this is one of my favorite stories. I'm going to geek out just for a moment. We launched Insights Explorer into a public preview. And this is an insurance company in the United States. And they had received a request at one Friday afternoon from their leadership team. Never happens, but it just so happened to this one time. They had a question around like, well, hey, over the last 6 months, have any of our customers suggested that we should be taking American Express? Right? Kind of a very specific question. And that analyst brought in a colleague and spent about 3.5 hours each going through the data sets. Discovered that in the time period, there were 3,000 records, of which 10 had referenced American Express. Gave the data to their boss. The next Monday, one of them comes in and says, well, wait a second, aren't we trialing Insights Explorer with Qualtrics? Let's see what it does. Loaded it up, and in 5 minutes, gave them one of the insights. One of the top 5 insights was payments, and American Express was listed. Now, do you think that 10 results from 30 is statistically relevant? Most would say no, but the AI understood the relevance and importance of that. So again, going from 6 hours of total time between two people to 5 minutes to bring those insights to market has been extremely, extremely powerful. And I get passion from listening to customers, get passion as we can understand how we're impacting their daily lives by giving them more time to reclaim to do other things for their organizations.
James, I think that's a nice spirit to sort of end this part of our discussion on, right? Like that is the glass half full. Apply energy from that scarce resource in other directions, doing more things, doing other things, doing those things better, faster, etc. Not instead of, which I think is often the narrative that's tied to this topic. Maybe if you guys are okay with it, we can move to a little bit of Q&A, and there were quite a few questions. So for those of you who threw some questions at us, at the panelists today, thank you for that. I probably, in the 4 or 5 minutes that we've got left, may not touch all of them. But if I could, I see a question about less structured research like qual research and other sources. But maybe, James, I'll throw this first question at you. The question is, many organizations highlight AI's potential to enhance the business, but data is showing that employees are also concerned about it. I think that was some of the beginning of our conversation today. What's your perspective? And Keenan, I may go to you too. How do you think organizations are balancing efficiency with ensuring the benefits are also improving the experience of those employees and not playing into those concerns or fears? James, what's your perspective on that?
It's a great question, and it comes down to adoption, right? If we think about almost half of respondents fear for their job, and the sooner that organizations can address how AI is going to improve the quality of their employees, will reap dividends, right? There's this expression that, companies with AI are going to overtake companies that don't use AI. There's nothing in there that says AI is going to wipe out companies or employees, right? Now, it might displace some jobs, but we see AI as being the next transformative, if you will, or like the next inflection point of how our jobs change. Just like mobile phones changed or the internet changed, right? We see that happening. And I feel like there's two parts to this equation. How quickly can you educate your employees on what it can do for them? But then also, as you build and implement AI, make sure you're listening to your employees, right? Is it working for them? Is it not working for them? Super important for both sides of that equation to come true.
I think that's true. And Keenan, I know the work that you and your team have done, whether it's internally when we started putting our hands on these tools a couple few years ago, or to the degree that we've been doing this with our clients and their employees, like that listening phase isn't just at the beginning. It's sort of all the way through to make sure that we're doing the right enablement, we're doing the right sort of change management for people so that it brings down those barriers, it brings down some of those concerns.
Definitely. Oh, sorry. I'll go back to the QA process for this. I think it's a great example of where a traditionally not super technical part of the business interacts with me, who's, I guess, dubbed the AI guy now within here. And I think James has also dubbed that within his organization. But building collaboratively, I think James had a point. Like, you really want to make sure that they're involved in the process, that they're educated. So at the end of the day, like, you've built this product, but really, it was a portion of that team that helped build it. And then it's not set in stone at the end of the day. You're continuing to build based on their concerns, but in a way that makes their jobs more efficient and that makes them feel empowered. And I think empowered is the best word to use here, so that they actually feel like they are using this as a tool set versus as a replacement for their own jobs.
Yeah, your beauty example earlier and James' comment about the Friday afternoon question from the executive team, like that's a very real thing that we encountered that this set of tools just does a great job of. If those of you listening in sort of recognize where on this journey you are, I noticed that we've got a lot more folks in the webinar today than necessarily even did the poll. Totally cool. But that might signal that you're not even necessarily sure where you are on the journey. Keenan, if you don't mind advancing one, wherever you do happen to be on this journey, what I can say unequivocally is, we've talked a lot about improving experiences on one side of the counter or the other. And Keenan and our teams are often designing and doing the strategies off of the great kinds of platforms like James was sharing earlier. And so these two organizations, I think, are really well suited to be able to help you no matter where you are in the spectrum questions your organization is grappling with or curiosities that you have about how to apply this into a better form of customer experience that just begets growth for your organization. So thanks for tuning in today. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Kyle or Colin. James, Keenan, you guys have both been really generous with your time. For our audience who tuned in, thanks for being a part of it. Lots of great activity to the panelists in chat and comments. If we didn't get to your question, we will absolutely do that. And there will be a recording of this posted and a link sent to you so that if you've got others in your organization who might benefit from this discussion, please don't hesitate to put that in front of them. Guys, thanks so much for your perspectives and your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody.